Justice for Colten! Justice for Colten! Justice for Colten!
Justice for Colten! Justice for Colten! Indigenous lives matter! Indigenous lives matter! Enough is enough. People call our people strong, tenacious, resilient. Because we have to be strong and tenacious and resilient. We have to be able to stand up after instances like this over and over and over again.
Those were the words of protesters following the verdict in the murder trial of Gerald Stanley. He was a Saskatchewan farmer accused of killing Colten Boushie, a 22-year-old Indigenous man who was killed by a shot to the back of the head that Gerald Stanley said was accidental, that it was a hang fire shot, which is that the pistol discharged when it wasn't supposed to do. The facts around this case, depending on the witnesses that were at trial and, of course, other things that were said outside of trial, are basically that Gerald Stanley and his son were on their farm when Colten Boushie and three other acquaintances, including his girlfriend, they had been drinking the night before. Their car had got a flat tire. They had attempted to steal a truck on a neighboring property, were unsuccessful, I guess because they wanted to get out and go home. They went to Gerald Stanley's property and attempted to take an ATV, according to Stanley. They said they were just coming to get help with their tire. He saw it differently. In the entire confusion of the situation, he went to get a gun, said fearing for the safety of his son, who was outside, as well as his wife, because in this confusion, like I said, the SUV, the car rather, that his wife was near started to move away. In this confusion, Gerald Stanley said he took the gun, fired warning shots, then went up to the SUV where Boushie was sitting, and he says the gun just went off and shot Boushie in the head. First Nations people say this is not a case of an accidental killing, that it was basically a shot at point blank close range. And they say the acquittal on murder charges is a travesty of justice. Now, they're not the only ones saying that. Our Prime Minister, this is pretty exceptional, weighed in on the case over the weekend. Here were his comments about the verdict.
I speak on behalf of millions of Canadians when I say that our hearts go out to Colten Boushie's family, his mum Debbie, his friends, and the entire community. I'm not going to comment on the process that led us to this point today, but I am going to say we have come to this point as a country far too many times. Indigenous people across this country are angry, they're heartbroken, and I know Indigenous and non-Indigenous Canadians alike know that we have to do better.
Okay, I have no question that a lot of people are heartbroken in First Nations communities, a lot outside as well, but clearly the family of Colten Boushie and people who were in that courtroom, it was packed. It was a very intense and hostile atmosphere. Colten Boushie's mother yelling murderer at Gerald Stanley after the verdict was read. Many people saying that they would have thought a verdict of manslaughter would be more appropriate here, even if it was found that, the gun went off accidentally, there was no intent to kill, but someone did die, so why is he being acquitted? But at the same time, for the Prime Minister to basically question the entire justice system, he wasn't in that case, he wasn't in the courtroom, and he's a politician. To me, that crosses a major line. You're not supposed to get involved. The courts and the justice system and the executive branch, the legislative branch of government, they are separate. You don't interfere in that. And it could affect the appeal, I think. Anyway, well, let's get an expert on to see if I'm right. Joseph Neuberger, our criminal defense expert here, criminal defense lawyer himself with Neuberger and Partners, joins the show. Again, hi, Joe.
Hi, good afternoon.
Hi, okay. Were you surprised by the Prime Minister's intervention in this case?
Yeah, we've had comments by the Prime Minister, and what is even more troubling to me is comments by the Justice Minister. When I listened to the comments by the Prime Minister, I think he did not want to be taken specifically to comment on the correctness of the verdict, but unfortunately, as a result of the way he stated his feelings and concerns, it is definitely taken as a comment on the jury's verdict in this case. Similarly, there were comments made by the Justice Minister, which more poignantly can be taken as a criticism of the verdict. So those two comments in conjunction in my opinion, are quite concerning, because it really is not a place for politicians to comment on the correctness of a verdict or really the judicial process in any particular case, which is ongoing.
Yeah, Jody Wilson-Raybould, who is the Justice Minister, she tweeted on Friday, "My thoughts are with the family of Colten Boushie tonight. I truly feel your pain, and I hear all of your voices. As a country, we can and must do better. I'm committed to working every day to ensure justice for all Canadians." Well, does that mean that Gerald Stanley didn't get justice here?
Yes, that's what I'm taking. That comment in and of itself, to me, is more serious than what the Prime Minister may have tried to communicate. And I believe that the Prime Minister was trying to talk in general about the struggle of Indigenous people in Canada over the course of a long period of time, and we know he's been trying to make great efforts in that regard. So I think he specifically wanted to just talk in general about that experience. The Justice Minister's comments specifically state that justice was not obtained in this case, and there's no comments about the family for the accused who is acquitted here. And I have grave concerns about that, because our Justice Minister must remain objective and unbiased in the management of the justice process in this country. And one of the really true great strengths of the Canadian justice system over many other justice systems, including the United States, is that our judges are independent and are not influenced by political.
Yeah, they're not elected. In the U.S., you've got elected judges.
They're not elected, and we go. And the appointment process is different as well. You can see the politics that play out in trying to appoint somebody to the appeal circuits or to the Supreme Court of the United States. We do not have the same political exposure and the party politics that go on in these appointments in Canada. This is a true strength in our Canadian justice system, and I've said this a million times. Our system is a beacon in the world for truly a democratic and justice process. When comments are made like this because a particular politician does not like a verdict, it harms the confidence in the justice system, and our public needs to have confidence in this justice system. More importantly, the Crown, in this case, can appeal to the Court of Appeal, and if necessary, and if leave is obtained, if they don't like the verdict at that stage, it can go to the Supreme Court of Canada. So there are checks in place in our system to deal with this case, and this type of commentary at this juncture is highly inappropriate.
Could it prejudice the appeal?
I hope not. I mean, I'm not a member in Saskatchewan. I'm not a lawyer practices there, but generally my feeling is judges really try and remain independent and assess the evidence clearly and objectively without a bias or prejudice for anybody. However, when you hear this, it's hard not to be influenced by it to some extent, and I don't think the judges will be influenced, but justice must not only be done, it must appear to be done. So political weighing in on a process that is still ongoing, because we don't know if the Crown's not appealing, I assume they are going to appeal, is highly inappropriate, and the impression that it gives to Canadians of interference in a court process is highly troubling.
Okay, it is to me as well. I'm going to put the devil's advocate argument, because you are a lawyer after all, to you, which is that First Nations people say, Aboriginal Canadians represent 5% of the population, yet they are 25% of the persons who are murdered. They're also disproportionately represented among the accused and the population of prisoners in our country. It's a crying situation that cries out for change. That this case is maybe that watershed, that lightning rod, and that's a good thing in a way.
Yeah, I don't think so. There have been, I don't think it's a lightning rod. There have been a lot of strategies and programs put in place over the last decade to try and deal with the challenges that Indigenous people are facing, including the biases that they face. And I can speak personally about many of the remote territories in Ontario where I know some judges who've recently been appointed have had experiences as defense lawyers and as Crown attorneys who've gone into the bands, who've gone into the territories to try and dig down to understand what's the ideology of the problems and how to apply a holistic approach to it. I have been very heartened by what I've read and what I've seen and by some of the judicial appointments, particularly in Ontario. I think there's been a lot of money thrown at it and a lot of careful thought. We are only still grasping the circumstances that face these Indigenous people, and there's a lot more to go. But this case shouldn't be the watershed. This should not be the straw that breaks the camel's back in this case. This has to remain a case about the facts, whether it's an Indigenous victim or not, we need to face the facts and deal with it appropriately according to law. And then the government needs to put into place additional programs based upon studies and good, solid information as to how we help Indigenous people in our country have high qualities of life and be less subject to the criminal justice system.
Okay, I want to thank you very much for your comments and your insight in this. Joe Neuberger is a partner in Neuberger LLP, criminal defense lawyer, and, of course, frequent guest here, criminal defense expert for 640 Toronto. Thanks, Joe.
Oh, my pleasure. Have a great day.